What's up, everybody? Doing an impromptu YouTube live here with my buddy JD from Goat District. Starting to cough right off the jump. Should be good. I had a hacking fest when I was on with you. I think the last time we talked, I was like hacking up a storm. Like I don't know, something about my good friends up in Canada brings my coughing out of me. So what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Not much. We've been going back and forth a bit since the NBA playoffs. So I think you had a bit of a niche to talk some Kawhi.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, it's one of those things. I like, I'm into football, lots of football friends, but like the analytics side of basketball just fascinates me. And like, I would say like I don't have like I can talk with football. Like, I have a lot of people, friends on Twitter, running in those circles. There's not many people I know that I can talk NBA with, and like the whole NBA finals for I had a personal vested interest in it at some point, but the whole NBA finals thing really interests me. So I'm like, and then I found out how big of a fan of the Raptors you were, and I was like, this is good. So this is good. But what was the finals like for you?
It was nuts, man. It's nuts. I live like about 30 minutes outside of Toronto, like the downtown group, born and raised in the area. So it's been crazy, man. Like I saw this thing when we first started and, people were making fun of the purple dinosaur. We were like Barney and we were like, they would play their games. I remember my dad took me to a Globetrotters game and they played in the same setup as the Raptors. And it was like a little part of the Sky Dome, you know what I mean? Like on the floor and then like a couple rows and this, like, it was so ghetto when you first went to watch the games. And now you go and it's insane. It's by far the most entertaining sporting event in the city. And Toronto's like, I mean, we're loaded. We got pretty much everything here except for NFL, of course. And as big as the Leafs are, and the Jays, I think the Raptors, you ask any Toronto fan, are by far the most entertaining games. They've just done a really good job. And now you got Jurassic Park. I mean, how crazy is that? And then, during the finals, they even had Jurassic Parks popping up all across Canada. It was nuts.
How many people end up at that?
Oh, they had like tens of thousands because the way the cops kind of split it up the way they have it, right, just to control the population. So they've got groups that are split. But the crazy thing is, by the end of it, they had the split groups, and at each group they had their own TV. Like that's how hardcore it was. The first time, everybody's like just from way back trying to see the one big screen. But by the end of when by the time they got to the finals, they had like a screen literally every group. I was like, that is hardcore, man. And people would go line up, like they'd be sitting there camping out for a day and a half, 2 days trying to get those spots.
That's not new though. Like it wasn't new to this playoffs. Like Toronto's been a Raptors. I mean, when they were making the runs with DeRozan, like, I mean, that wasn't that. Like, this isn't new to 2019, the Jurassic Park thing, right?
It's not. Drake, as much as he, rubs people the wrong way, and I was not at all a fan, he's grown on me in the sense that I respect the fact that he represents the city well. Maybe he does it again in a way that rubs people the wrong way, but you know what? There's not too many people, especially Canadians, that are out there, screaming from the mountaintops, and he's willing to do it to represent the Six. So I respect that. And he's kind of created this whole ambiance, like this whole attitude, the swagger that the Raptors have now. I don't think he's created all of it. Obviously the players do that, but just Jurassic Park, he played a big part in that, just having the feel at the games. So you know what? I give him respect for what he's done for the team and for the city, as much as, he's not everybody's favorite, but I respect what he's doing for the Raptors.
I think it's pretty interesting. Like you see him, he's a celebrity. He's worth a ton of money. He's got a huge following, but you watch him like that's how I watch games. Like, it's like, I'll be at a sporting event, like I'm at a Syracuse game and I'm sort of doing that thing. Right. And like, it's funny when you see that, like you'll watch a Lakers game or whatever. And like, Jack Nicholson sitting like front row and it's, he's just sitting there and whatever. But like you watch Drake and I'm like, yeah, I can definitely get on board with that. Like that's that's me and like a, less wealthy and like more seats farther off the floor. But yeah.
And I feel the same way. I was even in the finals when he wasn't at a game in Toronto, like on the floor, and they were away. He wouldn't be like up in his mansion. He would be right in the front of Jurassic Park on the stage in a couch, like a solo like sofa, and just going bananas every time they scored a basket. And like you said, that's exactly how I watch the games. I'm pretty much standing the whole game watching.
Yeah, just yelling at the television, like
totally.
So funny story. I think you and I might have been texting during this game, but it's game 5, right? Toronto's at home, game 5, closeout potential. And I'd like to get your perspective on this, because I had I guess I had a little bit of a different perspective. I'm watching at a game. My wife's at a conference. I'm with her. We're down in like Roanoke, Virginia. It had rained for like 3 straight days. So I'm like waterlogged. Like, I had drank way too much coffee, like doing research in a Starbucks. And so I'm sitting at the hotel bar, and I'm like, I'm watching the game, and I had an interest in it. I was looking for Toronto to win for betting reasons, I guess you would say. And so I'm like, this is it. Like, they got a chance. I'm like, they got a chance to close this thing out. And they shoot like nothing's going in. Like, they're getting looks, like nothing's going in. And I'm like, they're still only down I'm like, at some point, this thing's got to regress to its mean. And I'm just like, I'm having maybe a couple too many drinks. And I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, I'm like sort of yelling at the TV. Then it comes a good idea to try and live bet the thing. So I'm like, I'm getting like decent odds on this. And so I'm like, I'm just doubling down, and they get all the way back. I'm like, I chase this thing all the way back. And then it like sort of all goes to, they fall apart. Like, they get the lead. And it just goes. I mean, they just what was it with like less than 3 minutes left? Like, they made it all the way back, and it just sort of fizzled after that.
Yeah, they like you said, man, it was theirs to take. They just kept missing it was just awful because they were defensively, they didn't really need to do much, because it's not like, you know what I mean? Like, they weren't, like you said, they even came back and they were down by quite a bit. And you thought, you know what, they're gonna get it. They're gonna close this out. But I don't know. Going into that game, kind of figured it wasn't gonna be that easy. You know what I mean? Would have been nice to finish it at home, but I don't know what it is about these finals, man. There's something about teams closing it on the road.
And 5 out of 6 games were won by the road team. That's like, and it was like the same thing in the NHL. It was like a crazy season for like road playoff wins.
You know what? And they were talking about it obviously during the 2 last games of the NBA finals. Like, you got to think about it. You're at home, so people are calling. Everywhere you go, people are talking about it. You can't get away from it. On top of family, people wanting tickets, people this, that. Whereas you go on the road, it's a business trip. You know what I mean? You're going there, you're taking the bus, you're going there to play one game. That's the only thing you're thinking about. There's a big, to me, psychologically, as someone who's played sports, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like it's a different mindset. Who's that there? I see someone popping up in the corner there.
It's AJ Willie 2. Adam Wilson, the editor of my book.
What's up, guys?
Hey, so we're talking. JD and I are talking a couple minutes ago, and I'm like, we're gonna turn to a point in this conversation where Adam's gonna have a really good perspective on this. I was like, he's gonna be able to tell us what it's like to be on the suspense of a superstar leaving his hometown team. And so I'm like, I totally unannounced to JD, I sort of sprung Adam in here, but I was like, this is it. So I guess I have a little bit of like a personal, I have a personal perspective on this because of, well, I'll let you answer first and then I'll sort of chime in on what mine is. But what's your thoughts right now on like, how do you feel about this whole Kawhi thing, JD?
You know what? I kind of feel, it's kind of that feeling like if we hadn't won and we made it to the finals, I'd probably be way more hanging by every single, attempt at a decision, but because he came here and we won it, and he's done it. So to me, anything else is gravy. Personally, if I'm him, I sign 2 years in Toronto. I try to win maybe another championship. I'm in Toronto. I'm going to say if not 2, but at least try to win 1 more, but just be competitive for another 2 years, raise your stock even more. You've got it already set up here. Those teams that are like potential landing spots right now, again, I'm not as deep in NBA like I am in football. So, I'm going by kind of what I'm hearing, but it doesn't seem like he's going to be going to a situation where there's contenders, whereas everything's set up here, man. He is the king of the North, literally. He can walk on water up here. You know what I mean? And the team is ready to win, man. They're set. Like they've been building up to this for how many years? 24 years now. And this roster is ready to go. So if he stays, I just feel like he's got such an opportunity. For him to just walk away so quickly, I don't know. I mean, I know it all comes down to money at the end of the day, and he's from down in the Cali area, but obviously I'd love for him to stay. But either way, man, like I said, anything from here is gravy, I think, as a Raptors fan.
Yeah, Adam, you had LeBron. You're a Cleveland guy. You had LeBron. He comes and wins, and then he leaves. And honestly, like what he left, he didn't win the first time, then left. So you actually have you've got two totally different perspectives on this.
First off, JD, congrats on the championship. That's awesome.
Thanks.
So the first time around, it was when LeBron left in 2010. It was like your girlfriend that you were in love with decided to go on live television and rip your heart out for everyone to see. Because like JD, you were just talking about like Toronto and how he's the king of the North. Well, like LeBron was he's from here. Everybody, like I had season tickets to his high school games, and I remember sitting there when we won the lottery and that we were going to draft him, and like I started crying. And fast forward to 2010, he becomes exactly what I thought he was going to be, which was the second greatest basketball player of all time, another Michael Jordan. And then he leaves, and like people were burning jerseys, and people from other cities were criticizing like the fans here, but like everybody was devastated. Like I can't even explain what it's like. Like losing a championship is not like that. And there's nothing in sports that I don't think that I'll ever have that feeling again of the first time when he left. Then he comes back, and it's the greatest thing. Again, like I actually cried when he announced that on SI, and leading up to that, it was really great. All the stuff on Twitter, Cleveland fans were, tracking Dan Gilbert's, the owner of the Cavs, flight of his personal jet and stuff, and seeing that it goes down to Miami and yada, yada, yada. Then he comes here and then he wins and then he leaves again. So I think a lot of people are kind of like how JD was just talking about. Yeah, we got a championship. And so that was the first time that we've had a championship since the 1960s in any sport. And so I had never seen anything close to that. The closest thing would be Ohio State winning a national championship in football. But it's still not the same because Cleveland fans are just so hardcore. I mean, if you just walk around the city in the summertime, everyone has either a Cavs shirt on, an Indian shirt on, or a Browns shirt on. Like that's it. Like, and people from other towns think that we're insane. They're like, every time I walk by someone, they have a Cleveland shirt on. It's like, yeah, it's, everyone here loves their sports. So when he left the second time, I guess it wasn't as bad. Because we had won the championship, but I kind of just threw my hands up in the air and I'm just like, God, I'm so sick of like how the NBA works. So I guess, I heard that the Toronto fans, like, oh, they got a championship and they're nice people and they're not going to care that Kawhi left. But I got to be honest, if I was a Toronto Raptor fan and I was in Toronto, like I would be infuriated if he left. It wouldn't be the same thing as like LeBron, but because he's not from there. But I don't know. I guess that's just me, or that's just how we're wired here. It's just like you're either with us or you're against us. And LeBron left, and I thought he was with us, and I don't know. I don't know what's going to end up happening with him, but in terms of Kawhi, I think it's awesome that you guys traded for him and he won your championship. To me, it's unprecedented. I don't remember a player going to a team and winning a championship for him, at least in the NBA, and then leaving right afterwards. So I hope that does not happen to you guys. I'm not sure. Like, I think it's going to be hard for him to pass on the Lakers. Long term, that seems like, you had talked about the Raptors, but they're kind of getting older, right? Like Lowry's getting older.
Yeah, but that's
why like LeBron's young.
No. Kawhi. Your situation with Kawhi is like LeBron the first time, because it's a guy in his prime, right? You're right. LeBron is older, but Anthony Davis is there. I don't know. I don't, and anything that comes out of the LeBron camp about, like, there's word that he's like pitching that the team is going to be his for 2 years and then he's going to hand it off to Kawhi. That I don't trust anything that LeBron or his people put out. They have a reason for everything, and give them credit. I mean, they are amongst the most brilliant in sports. Like, if you talk about like brilliant GMs, LeBron's people are right there with, Daryl Morey and what they put out, and they think 5 steps ahead. So I don't trust them. I will say this for the Kawhi thing. The third star on a team with LeBron gets shit on. And I'm not sure that if he goes there, I don't think that he's going to be the third star, even though he's better than Anthony Davis. I think Kawhi is going to be the third star, just because they can push shit off on him. So I would not go if I was Kawhi. I think you do exactly what JD said. I would sign 2 years. I'm not sure that that's the best idea for him long term, but it keeps his options open.
Yeah. So I'll never forget the 2003 Carmelo Anthony led Syracuse Orange won the national championship. And I mean, people around here hadn't won anything. And, there's Yankees fans, but in terms of, I mean, this is largely Bills, and it's a Giants area. And that was pre sort of the Eli championships. I mean, there hadn't been a championship for like upstate New York, outside of the Yankees in a long time. And so, virtually ever. So I'll never forget they win, and it was, will he go? Will he stay? And he left, and I was like, you know what? I was like, I don't blame him. Like, I would go, and I was like, you know what? He can do no wrong. You know what I mean? Like, he gave us that, and it's funny. Like, I don't know. I see him and LeBron like vastly different, because Kawhi didn't pick Toronto, right? Like, that's not like he didn't pick Toronto. And I mean, LeBron did basically twice, right? I mean, the first time, he signs an extension or whatever, and then ends up leaving. And then the second time he comes back, and then he leaves again. Kawhi never picked them, but I just think Kawhi is so different than maybe anyone we've really, like, any superstar that we've seen. Like, he's just a different dude, and that's not a bad thing, right? I mean, he's just they had that Athletic article or whatever that was kind of, people were making fun of some of the stuff that he did, like, that he would basically talk to himself after every rebound and, say Boardman gets paid. Like, he's always been so different. And he's sort of not a non-conformist in the sense of, like, he's not fleeing for super teams. He beats them, right, with probably inferior surrounding talent than some of these teams. And I mean, I don't think anyone would really say that Toronto's roster was better top to bottom than, at least at the top, than Golden State's was. But I mean, he just his ability to just do everything. I mean, I think I'd take him against anyone. Like I love the guy. I mean, I think he's probably the person you start a franchise around. But he seems to fit in with like, and this isn't a knock on Toronto, but they're different in the sense of like just the way they're structured, and like they took like, I don't know. I think a lot of like, this is obviously a dynasty show, and I think a lot of like what the NBA does, like we can learn from and like steal stuff from dynasty. But like their GM, their Masai Uri, did I get that right, JD? Masai Uri?
You got it right, sir.
Yeah. I mean, he takes like, this is a team that like Dwayne Casey wins the coach of the year. Well, I think they were 1 seed last year.
Yep.
And they, for what, 2 or 3 straight years, they had high expectations going to the playoffs and get bounced. I mean, DeMar DeRozan was essentially a legend in Toronto. He was a fan favorite. They just couldn't get over the top. And I mean, here he goes out and fires Dwayne Casey, the coach of the year. And then he trades like the franchise favorite for a guy that basically sat out 3/4 of the year because of a injury, was disgruntled, had no idea if they were going to be able to sign him long term, like bring him in and just do different things with him, like in terms of just the way they're structured and the analytics they were willing to embrace, and the sort of the medical treatment and all that stuff that they're just willing to do aggressive and different things. And it paid off to a massive extent. I mean, the risk to trade, like that could have gone really bad. Like that could have gone really bad and probably it probably could have cost him his job. And I mean, it turned out, I mean, just taking the risk for a massive upside, it paid off. And I don't think I don't know, like coming into the season, I think people saw the Celtics and the Sixers and as the elite in the East. And I mean, Toronto has been as good as anyone in the East recently. So it's just I don't know. It was an interesting, just sort of that embracing upside thing that we kind of talk about that they did. And it's, I just think seeing those risks pay off, it's really cool to see.
I was trying to show you on my little notepad here, right at the top. The first thing I wrote before you started talking was GM. And I think that's the big difference between the situation with LeBron and Cleveland. We've seen what our GM can do, like what what Masai can do with regards, like you said, dude, that's one of the ballsiest moves I've seen to manage any kind of management do in any professional sport. This is a guy whose team was competitive the last few years. They were literally contenders the last few years. They had star players. They had the number 1 coach. It didn't matter, man. He was able to see what was missing to take it to the next level. And that's the comfort as a Raptors fan that I have. That, look, Kawhi is amazing, man. Like, as a kid who watched Michael Jordan, like made a kid, like me, like obsessed with basketball, man. And I see that same, like, what's the word, man? I'm thinking in French right now, but he just has like that Michael Jordan thing. You know what I mean? Like he's got that Kobe thing. Like you put on the last 4 minutes of the basketball game that he's in, and whatever he needs to do to control that game, he's going to do it. He's clutch. That's what DeRozan was missing. And I love DeRozan. That's the last Raptor jersey I bought, was the black and gold DeRozan jersey. But what DeRozan didn't have was clutch. He wasn't clutch, man. Jordan was clutch. Kawhi, it was so clutch, man. And yeah, I would love for him to stay here, But the fact that we have a guy running this franchise that has the balls to do what this guy's done the last 2-3 years, that's what makes it a little bit okay if Kawhi decides, you know what, I'm going to go back south of the border, because we get it. As Canadians, we kind of get it. We don't even take it like an insult. Maybe we should, but we kind of get it. We're like, you know what, you're not from, you're from down south. You're going to play at home. You'll probably make a shit ton of money, But I think the GM or the fact that Masai is here making those moves, and like you said, it paid off. It couldn't have paid off, and he'd be maybe out of a job, but you don't win those ships without taking those type of risks.
Yeah. Just the organizational clarity. Right. And like we saw this with Philly, right? With the Eagles, right? It was similar type of scenario. We didn't necessarily see it I mean, I guess we did see it from the GM, right? Howie Roseman did they went out and got Carson Wentz, and it's ultimately Nick Foles that wins them a Super Bowl. It's kind of funny how that comes about, but we saw this ability and this embracing risk and embracing sort of, winning and playing to win and not playing to avoid losing, which I think a lot of teams do. And like, you look at the teams that are aggressive and the teams that truly go for it. And when it pays off, like, the impact of that is massive.
Yeah, man, we'll see what happens. I don't know. Like, what are you guys thinking? What are you guys thinking he does?
I want him to go back there so much, because I don't really have I like Houston because I like James Harden, like I like Daryl Morey. But I want to, I sort of adopted Toronto in this whole, down the stretch beating the Warriors thing. Like, I was rooting for them when they were an underdog and they sort of won. And I mean, I love Marc Gasol. Like, that dude's been so good for so long. And
wow.
And I mean, those teams with Memphis, like, I mean, that was a little bit old school NBA, like with him and Zach Randolph, but and Mike Conley, like, they just never really got over the hump. But that dude's been so good for just an underrated. He's been so good for so long. To see him get a ring, and Lowry, like, I sort of like a lot of the guys on that team, and I just like Kawhi in terms of he's just willing to do things different, and that's to see a superstar sort of act that way and just be different.
His demeanor, right?
Yeah, and like, it's so clutch. Like, there's just a lot of and people make fun of him about some of the stuff that he does, like the laugh, and like, I don't know. I sort of embrace the that. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm a guy that's always been looked at a little different and made fun of and stuff. So I just I like Kawhi in terms of all that stuff. So it's to see him, and my wife's got Canadian family, so that's I mean, it's fun. Like, I'd love to see a Houston Raptors final every year. It'd be great.
Okay, I got a question for you guys, because Curry's wife is from Markham, and does he have a brother in the NBA?
Yeah, Seth.
Yeah.
And did they play the round before they played Toronto?
Yes.
I heard him say that, right, in the interview. I was like, wow, man, that's like insane when you think about that storyline. A little kid, I was talking about those games in the Sky Dome. You watch all those clips of him shooting balls when his dad was at the Raptors, and those are all in the Sky Dome. That was like, they just had like a little part of the bottom of the stadium. And that was like way back, man. And the fact that it came around like that it's another kind of cool story. The whole thing had like so many cool storylines to it,
Yeah, Drake wearing the Delaware jersey was like,
the Curry parents would the round before they cut the jerseys in half so that the front was Seth's jersey and the other one was Steph, and then the other one had the other halves of the jersey. So I've never seen that before. I don't know. It was cool that they got to play against one another, and like, they were both playing legit minutes, like, I'm sure there's been other times when brothers have played before, but that was really cool. So and the way I didn't watch the NBA much this year, just because I don't know if it was because I was butthurt about LeBron or what, but it just seemed it was disinteresting to me, because you have all these players going to teams, and like, you're getting the big three, and we did it here in Cleveland too, but it's like, is that what the NBA is all about? And then to see Toronto win with I just like that they had one star and a bunch of really good role players. So I really enjoyed watching them. I caught every finals game. I caught most of the Philadelphia series. It was nice not watching a team with LeBron on it, because the style of play that, the style of play and the ball stopping of LeBron James it gets obnoxious after a while. So, it was nice to see like a Toronto Raptors team they were actually a team. Plus, I hate the Warriors because they beat us in the finals. So I love that they beat on the Warriors. So
I'm so glad you're from Cleveland, because I've got a dynasty question I was asking. Jordan about before we came on, and it involves OBJ. So I'd be curious to see what you tell me.
Okay. Yeah, you want to take but real quick to put a fine point on this. Kawhi is I just looked up on Basketball Reference. They have a probability calculator for people to make the Hall of Fame. Kawhi is 24th in terms of active players at 29%. How do you feel about that?
Okay, 24th.
Behind Joe Johnson, LaMarcus Aldridge,
Jeez.
Kyrie Irving, as a matter of fact. Like, it's interesting. Two-time NBA Finals MVP. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel again, my knowledge of NBA is limited when you compare it to NFL, but I don't know, man. What is that? Not that's kind of nuts, no?
It seems pretty crazy to me.
Wow.
Yeah. Behind Rajon Rondo, Damian Lillard. Yeah. Give me the over on that.
That's kind of why I like what he's doing right now. You know what I mean? He's kind of like he's probably like sitting on some beach somewhere, just chilling.
Right.
He probably already knows what he's gonna do, you know? And you know what? Fuck all you fucking, all you people that like, because you got to think, like, he came into this season, he was injured, he gets traded, he's coming to Toronto. You know what I mean? People are probably like, oh, what's he gonna do in Toronto? He's gonna waste another season.
Right.
Now he's like, all you people that undermined, like that just didn't think this was gonna end into anything. And now look, man, the guy took it to the supreme peak, like the ultimate peak. And now he's like, you know what? You guys can chill there for a few minutes. Like I'm gonna make my decision. You know what? I'm gonna go take a dump for a sec. Like I'm gonna go to the paper. Like why watch it? Why not?
It's amazing how his camp has got to be great because they have not let anything out whatsoever. But to your point, like that's kind of the thing that I liked about him is that, you have these people saying like, oh yeah, you need to go to LA, you need to go to that big market. And I like how he's just a little different. That's kind of why I want him to stay in Toronto, especially since, every time LeBron came up for free agency, everyone's like, yep, he's going to the Knicks. Yep. He's going to the Lakers, and they even did it with Kevin Love when Love came up for initially when he came, they were saying that, oh, he's from California, so he's going back to LA. So I don't want to see Kawhi go back there because I'm sick and tired of all this. Oh, they got to go to a big market. It's like, why? Why does he have to? Why they have to go to a big market? Like, what difference does it make to someone in Cleveland or Toronto? It doesn't make any difference to me. Like, I want to see. That's why I like Giannis in Milwaukee. Like, I love that. I hope he stays there forever. Like, I want that to happen. So that's why I don't want Kawhi to leave. I want him to give the middle finger to all these people and stay in Toronto.
I think he does, man. And it might be a small market NBA wise, but he's got literally the entire country behind him, which like it's a pretty big deal for us up here. It's kind of like when the Jays did back-to-backs.
Yep.
You got an entire country behind you, man. That's it's we'll see what he does. It's definitely gonna be interesting. But it's funny how everyone's kind of holding their breath. That's what I love about it.
I was hoping we would get some news tonight.
Well, they said Friday, but doesn't look like
doesn't look like that's happening. All right, let's hit a little dynasty. Let's hit the namesake. JD, we were talking. It's funny. We were talking. I was like, "Yo, let's do this thing," and you're like, "Yeah, we'll get together." We're like, "Oh, let's do it Monday." Then like 5 minutes later, I'm like moving some stuff around, and I get a message like, "No, let's jump on now. I got some questions." So, I saw you had a trade. I think it was involving Corey Davis. I'm interested in this.
Yeah. So basically, the OG GOAT. So I run 3 GOAT leagues. They're really active. I made it to the final, lost in the final in this. I have Gurley on my roster, and I'm pretty stacked. But I have a lot of like young receivers. So Juju's my one, obviously. But I have like Sutton, Corey Davis, Galladay, and Boyd, which I love all of them. And I think like most of those guys are undervalued right now. But I'm being offered I was being offered something, and then this is what I would go back with. So basically, I was gonna send back based on what he offered me. It'd be Galladay, Sutton, and Corey Davis for OBJ. I feel like so just to give you my kind of 2 cents, and I'm curious to hear what you think of OBJ being in Cleveland, but I'm always cautious with receivers going, like number one receivers going to new offenses with new QBs, all that kind of stuff. So I feel like that might be, especially the first half of the season might be a factor. And I worry about the chemistry on that roster just with, I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of stuff going on there where, especially a guy like this that gets distracted easy. What are your thoughts on OBJ, and is that too much to pay for him?
So okay, so I like a
the smile he gives, like you don't be a good answer.
I like OBJ. But I mean, in terms of that trade, I don't think I would make that trade just because. So you said like those guys, you mentioned those guys, and you said undervalued right now. I actually think Kenny Golladay is way overvalued right now. I would be selling him as fast as possible. Not a big fan though. So, but I just don't think that that's the kind of trade that I want to make. I would rather be selling Golladay and something else, or I'm with Jordan on the Corey Davis stuff. Like, I think last year's probably his floor, pending like some year with that he has in the future with injury. I think he's just going to skyrocket up after this year. And to the OBJ point, there's a lot of mouths to feed. There's a lot of drama. I don't know how much of it is just the media and how much it actually affects the players. I think that Baker's going to spread it around. Like, I don't necessarily think that you're going to see this ginormous year out of OBJ. And I'm kind of with you on the a receiver going to a new offense. I think OBJ will be fine. I think he's going to be a wide receiver one. I wouldn't anticipate him being like a top 3 receiver or something like that. I think that Baker's going to spread it around. There's a lot of talent on the offense.
Yeah, so. I agree with everything you said. Like, same. I think Davis, we've seen his floor. I think this is probably the last chance you can probably pick him up at a reasonable price. I'm willing to move my Golladay just because I have 3 or 4 shares, but my Davis share is one I'm holding on to because that's the only one I have. So if I don't have to move him, I'd rather not. But yeah, I see what you're saying. You're moving 3 receivers for 1, and it's like iffy. It might not be the best move. I'll just give you just quickly what the original offer was. So he was sending me OBJ and Godwin, who's another guy that you'll probably say is being overvalued right now, right?
He is, as a matter of fact. I would say that, JD.
Yeah, I figured just because Golladay and Godwin I find are very similar. Like, I have back-to-back, ranking wise, potential wise, the whole deal. The difference for me is that Golladay has a chance to be the one. I know it's not a one in as much of a dynamic offense, but I think things like that change. And when you're looking at talent and opportunity, I feel like Golladay has one up on Godwin, in my opinion. Just because, look, Evans is going to be the one. He's a stud, and he's going to be there for a while, in my opinion. But either way, they're very similar value.
I agree.
He offered me OBJ and Godwin for the 3 guys I mentioned: Sutton, Davis, Golladay, and then he had Boyd and Goddard on top of that.
Jeez.
So you stripped it down to basically be Golladay, Sutton, and Davis for OBJ.
Well, because I have McDonald as my Vance, as my like tight end 1 right now. I had Gronk. Obviously, he's gone. And I'm trying to work a deal with Boyd. What was it? Boyd and Goddard for Hunter Henry. Or like not that exact deal, but I mean those pieces where I'm trying to bring Hunter Henry over to be my tight end 1.
Interesting. If you could do Golladay, like, could you substitute? How does he feel about Boyd versus Davis?
Oh, I think he likes them both because he had them both in that offer, right? So I would imagine
if you could send Golladay, Sutton, and Boyd for OBJ, like, would he say yes?
Yeah, he said the same thing, Adam.
Yeah. That's the first trade with Corey Davis in it from like a value standpoint right now. Like, I don't think it's bad. I think that that's reasonable from how the market looks at it. Right. But I would much rather have Galladay being the major piece because people perceive him as the major piece, and then add on to that to get OBJ. But I definitely don't want Corey Davis in there. Like, to me, Corey Davis, even right now, long-term value is worth more than Galladay. Now, again, I'm not a Galladay fan, but yeah, I want to put in ancillary pieces with Galladay, make Galladay look like the star of your side of the package, and then ship him. And, I like Tyler Boyd. He's fine, but limited upside, right? And Sutton, I don't know. That's the jury's still out on him. So again, I would probably, if I didn't love Sutton, I would be trying to throw him in deals this year. So.
And that's everything you just said is exactly my train of thought, because Galladay is the main piece I'm trying to move. Sutton kind of the throw in to add the value. The only reason I didn't have Boyd in that one deal is because I was trying to move Boyd in the other deal for Hunter Henry. But I see what you're saying. If I can close the deal and just replace Boyd and Davis, that's a good deal right there, I think.
Yeah, because I think with Corey Davis, like, his upside is a wide receiver 1, right? Like, not just like a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, like a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. Like, I think that's what he profiles to be.
That whole Tennessee offense right now has tons of value in it. I don't know. I can't remember if Jordan's a fan or not, but even Mariota, like people, I think undervalue injuries. Like, these guys are athletes, man. Like, we're all whatever in our whatever. I'm probably the oldest guy on here, so I'm not going to say age, but like you just grab something the wrong way and you're hurt, and then you're right off for a couple weeks, where these guys are like pounding, and I hate to always bring it back to these guys, but like Todd Gurley's, the Sony Michel, like, people are freaking out. And it's like, do you know what these guys do for a living? You think these guys are going to have no injuries? They're going to be like it's like a car that's on the racetrack and you're comparing it to a car that's in a showroom. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how I see it. Like, these guys are on a track, man, like on the reg, like those tires are worn. Those pieces they're trying to replace them as much as they can, but you can't expect these guys to everyone going like on a perfect slate.
Yeah, I would. So I'll just say, like, I think Corey Davis is a wide receiver 1, and it's just waiting to happen. One of my favorite stats in all of fantasy football this year is Corey Davis last year, 1.64 PPR points per target, which is, to give you an idea, the average last year target was 1.81. So he's nearly 0.2 points per target below what is the average. Now, you might think, oh, that's bad, or that shows that he's not any good. That is essentially a random walk year to year. So that stat is essentially, it has no correlation year over year. The best example in recent memory is DeAndre Hopkins' 2016 season, where it looked like a train wreck on paper. I mean, he had 151 targets and didn't finish as a top 24 wide receiver. It's a massive historical outlier in terms of just the target share and what he produced. And actually, him and Allen Robinson basically produced the exact same fantasy stat line on the exact same targets. They were both massive outliers that year. Hopkins bounced back with just an enormous 2017 and 2018 season. That stat to me points to all bad luck. And I did some further digging on Corey Davis, and basically you can tell what your touchdown percentage should be by targets from individual yard lines. And it's pretty close throughout, like basically going from your own goal line to, it starts to get higher in the, in the other red zone, right? And when, as you're going into score, but it really gets high inside the 10-yard line. And if you just look at like Corey Davis's targets in the red zone and then inside the 10-yard line last year, he was like one of the most targeted receivers in that range. And if you just looked at the average expectation on what you would expect those targets to produce in terms of touchdowns, he was almost 3 touchdowns below what you would expect. And so I was like, that's odd. So let's go back and look. And there was some fluky, funky, weird shit going on. Like, the ball went through his hands. There was a couple of deflections. He could have easily scored 5 touchdowns more than he did last year. And a couple throws were off by Mariota. Like he should have let him, threw him on his back hip. I mean, there was like all these things that you could have easily, like he could have easily been the most efficient wide receiver in the red zone last year and posted like a top 15 season, just if like 3 or 4 passes ended up differently. So all of that's to say, I think he's in line for a big time bounce back in terms of his efficiency stats. And I mean, he finished wide receiver 28 last year. I have a hard time seeing, based on his pedigree, his talent, that being, and his, what I think will be a target share. Like, I have a hard time seeing that being anything worse than a concrete cement floor, like for the next 5 years. Like, I have a hard time seeing him finish based on his talent, everything, in his stat line, him producing worse than that going through his prime. I mean, I think he's that type of player. I'm totally with Adam on Galladay and Sutton. I've never been I'm a big round one wide receiver guy, but I've never been I see the allure of Galladay. But I watched last year, every Detroit game, and I covered him for Football Guys. And I'll tell you what, Galladay's just not a number one wide receiver. He just can't separate. And when you see him separate, it's running underneath routes against zone coverage. And it's not like he has a really tough time separating on the outside against man-to-man coverage. I just don't see him as a wide receiver one. And when that type of player is a wide receiver one, you see what happens with their offense. They get bogged down like they did last year when Marvin Jones was hurt. Golden Tate was traded and Kerryon Johnson was hurt. Like, that offense just bogged down because he's not the type of player that's an alpha wide receiver one. Sutton, same way. Like, I get the allure. Like, I get the metrics. I get all that. I just have never been that impressed with him as a player on tape. And you see him fall to the second day of the NFL draft. I think that sort of speaks a little bit to that. So all that's to say, I love Davis. Like, I if I was going to do this trade, like, I would add Tyler Boyd plus to take Corey Davis out. Like, I would give something on top of Tyler Boyd to get it done in place of Corey Davis. Like, if that's what it took. But if like you could just straight put Tyler Boyd in that and take Corey Davis out, like, I would do that in a heartbeat. And honestly, like, Adam, I'll be interested to see your thoughts on the Cleveland offense. I was talking the other night with my buddy Jacob Rickroad, and we were just kicking around some ideas on the Cleveland offense. Tell me what you think about what do you think about David Njoku, like 90 targets next year?
90. I was gonna say 70, 80, but I don't think it's impossible. I just wonder if the number 3 and 4 receivers turn out to be more than what you think that they're going to be. Like, I wonder if Callaway's used in a bigger role, and Hollywood Higgins, like, Baker loves him. And so I just wonder if they're going to go single back 4 wide receiver sets more often than you would think.
Yeah. He
that's
finished
the only thing I worry about with Njoku.
Yeah, I mean, he finished with 88 last year in an offense that didn't have OBJ. Like, I don't know. I could see him, like, I don't know. I could, like, I think
89 correction.
89.
Yeah, 89. But you got to look like this guy. See, I think Njoku, you guys mentioned 2 guys that I'm loving this year that are going under the radar in this offense, and that's Njoku and Antonio Callaway. Mm-hmm. So even as a wide receiver 3 in this offense, he's got tons of value because the way, like you said, Adam, just spreading the ball. And Njoku, man, like, this guy's a beast. And what is he, like? He's 23 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to be a really nice target. The only concern I have is with Landry there. Does that, like, where do you guys see Landry and Njoku fitting together? They're taking targets around the same areas. Am I right there? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was thinking about it like if you sort of assume let's assume like a sort of static offense in terms of, like, we don't see Joku's role really grow that big. Like, I don't know, they seem sort of out oddly on Duke Johnson. Like, it turns out to be like they throw to the running back a bit, but it's not a focal point of the offense. Like, you see 80 targets there, in terms of like the running backs. Like, you might see 80 to 100 targets to wide receivers, not Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. And you look in that, like, that there's the possibility of 280 plus to Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. Like maybe that's not the most likely outcome, but it certainly seems in the range of outcomes in terms of what's possible. And if they play if they played 16 games, like people are running to the hills on Landry. I don't know, man.
I bought him for Montgomery, man, because I needed a receiver, and I have no problems with that at all.
Yeah,
you said 280 between the two of them.
Yeah,
I think that's almost a lock. I think that the thing about the offense is I don't think that you're going to see them run the ball a lot. Like I think that they are going to throw it a ton, and so the only hesitation on Njoku is I just wonder about the ancillary pieces, the running backs out of the backfield, that kind of stuff. But for Landry and Beckham they're still going to get fed. That doesn't mean that they're going to put up, but 2 number wide receiver 1 seasons, but like Beckham's going to get his and Landry is going to get his. I think that they are going to be chucking the ball way more than people think, and I don't think it's anything like it's not that they want to feed all their wide receivers or anything like that. I just think that Kitchens is going to go to what is Baker Mayfield's strengths, and he is a point guard, right? And he is just distributing the ball. And it doesn't mean that even Chubb's going to have a bad year. I think he regresses a little bit, but he's going to get huge touchdown runs. But I just don't see them handing the ball off 30 times a game, or 25 times a game. Like I think they are going to throw the ball all over the place.
But just based on what Jordan was saying, like he's got 89 targets last year. This offense should get better, right? Just basic science. They're going to get better. Mayfield's going to be more comfortable. He didn't start every game last year. If you even add 20 targets to Njoku, because you got to remember, Landry's not necessarily going to be a red zone guy. He's more between the 20s, whereas Njoku's kind of that big body in the red zone. He had red zone target share, so he had 8 targets last year. Mm-hmm. He had 4 touchdowns, which just 4 touchdowns. He was 8th as a tight end. I mean, that's how sad that position was last year.
So I think he's a lock for a top 10 tight end season. But so the thing about Njoku is I think what they're going to try to do is get it to him in the seam, because he's just a big, huge athlete that can make plays, right? So they're not going to have him do like Jimmy Graham stuff where he just runs down 8 yards and turns around and posts up. I could see, good numbers out of Njoku, but I just don't know that he is going to get this 90 targets. I think it's possible. It's within the realm of possibilities, but it's not a knock on Njoku.
Yeah, I'm just piecing together the numbers here, and they threw 574 times last year, and again, some of that was with Tyrod Taylor before Baker took over. So that, there's some limited efficiency there, right? They weren't operating at maximum efficiency. Let's assume that bumps up, and just in terms of, keeping drives alive and all that stuff, like that number could go north of that, but let's just start there as a baseline. I mean, they threw the ball about 110 times to running backs last year. Like 62 of those were to Duke Johnson. If they're really looking to phase him out, that number goes down, you would figure, right? And I don't know, even if Njoku goes, right? So even if Njoku comes in at about 100 targets, right? Like, and you book in the rest of the offense as, basically the non-Njoku tight ends and the non-big 2 wide receivers at like 100 targets, like there's still a ton of meat on the bone for some of these, for both Beckham and Landry. Like it could be an enormous, and maybe that outside of maybe that ancillary receiver number is a little bit higher. Maybe it's not, they don't get to a full 300 targets, but I could definitely see like between 275, 280, like I could see that number targets to both Beckham and Landry. And that offense would just seem to roll. I think
they both get 140 plus.
And that's not even considering a growing pie, right? We're just assuming from a baseline of last year that seems reasonable. So we'll see. Callaway had 79, Higgins had 53, Perriman had 25. Just looking down to see who else. I mean, that's almost the number that Beckham would be, right? And so
keep in mind Hunt's coming in the second half as well. So that's the interesting thing. And, I don't have anything to go off of other than Freddie Kitchens just creates these plays and these formations that he uses, and he just does weird stuff. I think that you could see the offense shift a little bit in the second half when Kareem Hunt gets there. I actually think that he's going to be used in the passing game, more in the screen game, but that'll be some of your targets. I don't know what's going to happen with Duke Johnson, but I think you're going to see like a steady dose of Nick Chubb. But I think in the second half, like Kitchens likes to work to the players' strengths and do what they like. And I can see a world where in the second half, week 10, week 11, once they start get rolling in the second half of the season, where Kareem Hunt is in there almost as much as Chubb, and they're just splitting carries. And by that time in the season, like, it's just going to wear down defenses, and they're going to do wonky stuff like, screens and things like that. And I can see Hunt being in there. I think he's going to have a decent role
if he doesn't get suspended again.
Well, there's that. So.
Yeah, I feel like Chubb is too good. I don't know. I feel like he's too good. He's going to be in a good offense. He's going to get tons of opportunity, even if he's limited to, like you said, maybe they're not going to run the ball as much, but he's going to get, in my opinion, tons of red zone opportunity. I don't know. I don't see Hunt coming in after 8 weeks off. He's got to, he's going to need a couple of weeks to. I don't know. I'm kind of fading Hunt personally.
Well, yeah, and so I didn't own Hunt to begin with, but so in the second half of the season, they were actually running 3 running back sets, like a wishbone, where they were passing out of the formation. And so Kitchens is just unpredictable when you're now that means that Dontrell Hilliard, who you probably never heard of, he was actually in the games and getting spells and stuff like that. So that's why I say, like, I don't think that Kitchens is going to care. He's just going to put the best players on the field and whatever is working. And so Chubb is I like Chubb better than Hunt, but I think Hunt, there is a role for him as that pass catching. Like, I don't think he's gonna be a spell back. I see them more Chubb 60%, 65% that carries, Hunt the other.
Interesting. I have heard of Dontrell Hilliard. He may or may not be one of my favorite stashes on the back end of my roster.
I know you have. So any third string running back you've heard of.
Let me ask you guys this, just going back to Njoku for a second, because we do something on our show on the GOAT District where we do on the clock, so OTC. So for 2019, David Njoku or Eric Ebron?
I like Njoku.
I think Njoku too. I mean, that you can't score touchdowns at the rate that Ebron did last year.
What about with Jared Cook? Njoku or Jared Cook?
That's a really tough one, actually, for me. And I like Jared Cook.
By the way, Jared Cook has if you look at his seasonal finishes, a pretty remarkable string of them for a guy that isn't, I don't think, that highly thought of. I'll say this about Jared Cook. If you were to tell me that there was going to be a tight end that's not in the top 3 right now in terms of Kittle, Ertz, or Kelsey that finishes as tight end 1 this year, I would take Jared Cook. That would be my guess. So give me Cook for this year. I like Njoku long term pretty. I think he's pretty solid, but give me Cook this year.
See, I just worry they haven't had a tight end there for a few years now, and I know that they've had, when they did have Ben Watson, they were getting him, looks. He had some crazy games while he was there, but I just wonder if the offense really needs a feature tight end, or a tight end that can do the things that Cook is capable of doing. Like, when you pictured in your mind the offense running with Cook and him being the Jimmy Graham type, like, I just don't know that they go back to that. That's my only hesitation with it. And so that's why I find myself, like, it's hard for me to draft Jared Cook in drafts.
I have the same hesitation. Last year, I specifically was targeting Jared Cook late in drafts. I was on the Dynasty Warzone with Randy, and we're doing a AFC. What are they? West?
Or West? Yeah, West. AFC West.
And we were doing AFC West. I remember we were almost done the Raiders. I was like, whoa, dude, Jared Cook, man, that's like my sleeper on that roster. Who the hell else is going to catch the ball, right? And I don't see the same scenario like you said going into New Orleans. So I'm very hesitant. Jared Cook, like I have a share in, I have a couple shares in Dynasty, and if I could move him, I'd probably move him. I don't mind him as like a low end. He's like a low end tight end 1, if you're really kind of pushing it, but he's more like a comfortable tight end 2, in my opinion. But I'm with you, Adam. I'm very hesitant on Cook going into this year. I think it feels good with that offense.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, but I think the offense is also shifting, similar to like a New England. I think that offense is moving more towards the running game. I just pulled off a pretty big trade in our super flex where I moved Barkley for Kamara, AJ Green, and like a 2021 second or something. Just because I feel like this offense is going to be literally running through those running backs in New Orleans.
Jared Cook, last 2 years, tight end 5, tight end 12. I just
Jordan sold. He's buying.
And listen, I mean, we can talk about what that offense looks like without, does it really need a tight end? Those things. I mean, I don't really follow, like, I don't say bet on certain offenses or bet on certain teams very often, but when Sean Payton does something, that interests me, right? Traquan Smith's,
just gonna say that name as I was just
still to be determined, right? But I mean, he maximized Kamara. I mean, he ultimately maximized Mark Ingram after Mark Ingram got out of like what seemed like a doghouse that was 4 years long or whatever. I mean, just gets everything out of Thomas. But there were points last year where, and the Dallas game really, I think was a good example of this, where they didn't match up well with Dallas. Like they can exploit a lot of teams with what they do, but Dallas had a good cover corner for Michael Thomas, and they had linebackers that could hunt, and they just, I mean, they put New Orleans on lockdown, and you need another weapon. So whether that's Smith or whether that's Cook, I mean, Cook just seems like a type of player that can really, like, that Sean Payton is expertly qualified to maximize. And like I would, if he plays 16 games this year, I'd be really comfortable saying that he's a top 6 tight end this year.
I mean, I don't dislike him, but I worry that it just feels too good. That's my hesitation. So I try to look at the possible outcomes, and that's the one that comes up.
Graham in Green Bay last year, right? It just felt really good, right?
It did feel really good.
No, and that's all fair, but I mean, we're sort of in a time frame with tight ends where I think we need to somewhat change our expectations. I don't know if that's the right word, but we're post Gronkowski, we're getting post Graham. I mean, Jimmy Graham was tight end 12 last year, so I mean that's we can knock on him. He was still a top 12 tight end. I mean, heck, Vance McDonald on 50 catches was tight end 10. Right. So, I mean, when we sort of think about these things, we're post Gronk, we're getting post Graham, we're post Gates. I mean, Witten's back, but, we're post Gonzalez. I mean, Gonzalez, Gates, and Witten took up 20% of the top 12 seasons between 2008 and 2017. And now we're losing Gronkowski, and we probably can peg Graham not to be in that anymore. I mean, what we have to look for at the tight end position is totally different now. And that's something that I don't know if we when we talk about guys like Jared Cook, and I mean, Austin Hooper averaged 9.3 yards per catch last year and plotted his way to a tight end 6 season, right? There's plenty of room there for a guy that plays 16 games and gets 85 targets to finish as a top 8 tight end. And that might not sound sexy, but I mean, Cook went 68, 896 and 6 touchdowns last year. And I think he could improve those by 15% across the board, and he's looking at a historical top 3 season. So, I mean,
well, but the question is between Njoku and Cook. And so that's why it was a struggle for me at first, because I see them as very similar. Same thing. What you said is there is that possibility of a top 3 season, and that's ultimately what you're looking at with the shitty tight end position. That's why we're doing tight end premium leagues and stuff like that, because it's not a very good position. And so that's why earlier I had said I think Njoku is a lock for a tight end 1. Like the competition is just not there. Yeah. And so guys on these offenses, like I'm sure Cook is going to be a tight end 1. Like I'm sure of it. Now where it is, he's got the upside to be, a top 3 tight end. Long term, I like Njoku a little bit better. Not a little bit better, a lot better. But yeah, the feels good really worries me because of where you have to take him in startup drafts. So
I think there's only really 6 tight ends that I'm dynasty wise that I'm comfortable with. Like you've got, your top 3, and then it's OJ. After Henry, he's kind of growing on me. I've always thought he was kind of overvalued, but again, because of the landscape, and then Engram's kind of the last one. You've got the Vance McDonald's, which are nice at their price, the Chris Herndons, the Hooper's a guy I've been on for the past 3 years now. I think he's got an opportunity to move up. Mark Andrews, Gesicki's a guy that's free right now. My favorite guy, Jack Doyle, he's going to in an amazing offense. I prefer him over Ebron, especially at their prices. But I feel like you've got a handful of guys at the top, and then you just roll the dice, right? But
yes,
looking at the receivers, just because you mentioned Tre'Quan Smith, I mean, I feel like every draft I'm doing those eliminators right now with John Bosch, and I'm trying not to take Tre'Quan Smith, but he's free, and he's potentially the wide receiver 2 in Drew Brees' offense. Going into his second year, can easily pop this year at his price. I mean, it's kind of like a no-brainer. I don't know. Do you guys agree? Is that someone that you guys are seeing at a value right now?
Oh, I'm with you 100%. He gets drafted so late in startups, and he is, you can get him basically free in some leagues, which is crazy. I think if you own him, you have to keep him. You shouldn't be selling him. You can't get anything for him. And yeah, he's in a Drew Brees offense. I wonder, is that the wide receiver 2 that they've been looking for? Maybe he is the guy that Sean Payton always imagined as his wide receiver 2. So yeah, I mean, I'm a Tre'Quan fan too.
Right now, just looking at the ADP on DLF, Geronimo Allison is going just ahead of him. There's 0% chance I'm taking Geronimo. I don't have Allison anywhere. If anything, I'll take a flyer on Kumaro because I'm in some really deep drafts where he's in the 40th round or 35th round or whatever. But I'll take MVS, a couple times, but I'm not going near Allison. Who else did I see on here? Hakeem Butler's going ahead of Tre'Quan Smith.
Oh, that's
fourth rounder. That's he's barely starting right now, and Tre'Quan's the number 2 receiver in that offense. I don't know. I see a lot of guys ahead of him right now where I'm it's Mecole Hardman going ahead of Tre'Quan Smith. I get it, the upside, the possibility, but we all know Hill's probably getting 3-4 games max.
6 games, man.
6. Give him 6. You think give him 6, you think that's enough time for Hardman to kind of build, that rapport and kind of plant his flag and as a significant fantasy player? I don't know.
I don't even know what to bring up out of the things you just said to Jordan. Should I bring up his feelings on day 3 wide receivers or the suspensions? Because Jordan, you're the only one who's calling out 6 games for this. Everyone else is 3, 4. So, but you were right before with Zeke Elliott.
In fairness, I was wrong on Hunt for reasons that, again, I still don't understand. The NFL didn't make it exactly clear on why they suspended him 8 games. It didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me unless you pieced together a couple of incidents, which is, I think, the only way you actually get to 8 games. But I don't see the just for a public service announcement. I don't see the Hunt 4 games thing. I there's just no unless
Hill, you mean?
the Tyreek Hill 4 games thing. What did I say? Hunt? Did I say Hunt?
So
Sorry about
you think
It still haunts you.
games?
Say that again.
You think minimum 6 games then for Hill?
I think minimum 6 games, and I'll tell you why. I'm just pulling up the I'm just trying to pull up the document real quick.
I'll be right back.
The minimum 6 games deal on Tyreek Hill is basically, I'm trying to find the I can't find it. But basically the domestic violence policies, I guess what I'll call it for the NFL, it's under the personal conduct policy, but there's a specific provision that basically has domestic violence as part of the domestic and abuse against children as as basically the crux of it. And it essentially says that there's basically a 2-step thing to this, right? There's basically a 2-step process to this. The first step is whether or not you believe whether or not the NFL, not you or I, the NFL believes that Tyreek Hill committed violence against his child. Yep. Okay. And so that is a factual determination that they get to make. That is a fact, right? They are the fact finder, and they basically make the determinations on what they believe the facts are. Okay, so we might disagree with it. I mean, I had some problems with what. All right, here we go. I found it. I have some problems with what happened in the Zeke thing, because I thought that the facts that they relied on were, how should I say this? Had significant credibility questions in terms of what you would have had to believe. However, you could believe the victim, right? You could believe, I think it was Zeke's ex-girlfriend. I think was their relationship, ex-boyfriend, girlfriend. You could believe what she said. And if you believed her, then he violated the conduct policy. Okay. There were reasons to not believe her, based on a lot of things that was publicly reported, but the NFL chose to believe her. And as a result of that, believe that he committed domestic violence. So that's basically the first step of the prong. And that's a factual determination solely for them. I mean, this is the same thing that they fought about with Tom Brady, right? They made a factual determination that he violated the policy, right? Not the same domestic violence policy, but that he broke the rule, right? And that's a factual determination for the NFL. Brady fought it in court. You can't really do that, right? Like that is up to the NFL to make that factual determination. Once that happens, right? So if the NFL believes that he committed violence against his child, the policy reads, and I'll quote it, with regards to violations of personal conduct policy that involve criminal assault or battery, in parentheses felony, which makes literally 0 sense. This whole policy is pretty jacked, but that makes virtually no sense. 2, domestic violence, dating violence, child abuse, or any other form of family violence. That would be the prong. Or 3, sexual violence, including physical force or committed against person incapable of giving consent, which isn't applicable. First offense will subject the offender to a baseline suspension without pay of 6 games, with consideration given to aggravating and mitigating circumstances. Okay, so once the NFL believes that this occurred, the baseline suspension is 6 games. Now, here's the interesting part. The presence of possible aggravating factors may warrant a longer suspension. Possible aggravating factors include, but are not limited to, a prior violation of the personal conduct policy, which we don't know that Tyreek Hill has had. He hasn't been suspended in the NFL. So that's not it. Similar misconduct before joining the NFL, which he has, right? He has, right? Mm-hmm. I believe it's the same woman that he's with now, and I believe she was pregnant with this child where he assaulted her. I think there was an allegation of strangling too. I don't remember the specific facts, but he definitely abused her prior to being in the NFL.
Same girl.
Same girl. There's some other things too, violence, including a weapon, choking, repeated striking, or when an act is committed against a particularly vulnerable person, such as a child, a pregnant woman, or an elderly person, or when the act is committed in the presence of a child. So there's some things there that could spark aggravating factors. So when you in possible mitigating factors, right? And this is they don't explicitly list them, but mitigating factors might be taking responsibility for what you did. There's some other things like if they believe that this was some sort of disciplinary thing where he hurt the kid, right? That might be, although we haven't seen that in specifically the Adrian Peterson situation. They didn't seem to think of it in that sense as a mitigating factor there. He got suspended for a long time. So I don't think that's going to be something that they look at, but there's cultural and sort of historical reasons for, and specifically older people, not necessarily maybe as younger people, but where physical discipline was a form of disciplining as a child. So, but the NFL hasn't really shown a history of wanting to think of it that way. I think that there's not really, unless he's going to take responsibility for it, right? Which maybe, I mean, he met with them for 8 hours. Maybe that's what the conversation was about. But if he's not taking responsibility for it and isn't taking steps to try and prevent it sort of proactively, I got a hard time seeing them suspending him for less than 6 games because all the factors aggravate. They don't mitigate. So, I mean, this whole 4-game thing, I mean, we heard the same thing with Zeke, right? And what did they do? They applied this policy, which is the one time they've really applied it clearly with a good written decision and all that stuff. But they applied the 6 games, and there was plenty of reasons to think that his conduct was questionable, right? That he actually did what he was alleged to have done. There's plenty of reasons to question that, and they came down on suspending him. So we don't necessarily know what they're going to believe about the actual cause of the injury and whether Tyreek Hill's to blame or any of that stuff. But I got a hard time seeing if they believe that he did it, they suspend him for any less than 6 games. I have a hard time seeing that.
And what about KC, right? You guys think KC hangs in there and keeps them, like they're talking extension, but is that really going to happen?
I think what's going on here, and I think what's going on here is someone's peddling something, and I don't know if it's Tyreek Hill's camp. I don't know if it's people in KC or what, but there's someone putting out narratives that just don't seem to make sense. And again, I could be wrong, and I was wrong on Hunt. I didn't think that they would max him for sort of what they did to him, although there was multiple allegations of stuff that he had done, and so there's all that. The Hunt situation is an interesting comp with KC because what got Hunt in trouble with KC was not that he did this, right? And they have a long history. I mean, Andy Reid, you can say a lot of things about Andy Reid, but one thing that he has consistently done is brought on people that have prior problems, and whether that's somewhat related to his own familial background or whatnot. I mean, there's been articles written about it too that sort of try to get at that. But he brought Michael Vick out of prison back to the Eagles, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this isn't a guy that is afraid of these scenarios. But what got Hunt in trouble was not what he did. It was that he lied about what he did. And they were very specific about that when they cut him. And so, we don't necessarily know what's going on, right? There's a lot going on behind the scenes that we're not privy to. And I suspect that the Chiefs probably haven't talked to Hunt about it because he was away from team activities. He's probably got counsel that says we don't want to talk yet until we deal with the NFL. So that stuff, that Tyreek Hill KC stuff is probably to be determined on how that all goes down. But I have a hard time seeing 4 games. I really do. And again, I could be wrong, and I was wrong on Hunt. But I don't think that – I mean, this policy to me is pretty clear, and they pretty clearly did it in Zeke. And I think it's absolutely applicable here.
It's funny you talk about Andy Reid bringing in, I guess bad boys. We got another team in the NFC with a head coach that's known to bring in those bad boys, and that's Mr. Belichick. And is that a question of ego? Is that these guys thinking they can tame the lion? Because it kind of feels that way. You look at which teams these guys end up. It's obviously the rookie coach is not going to come in and say, all right, bring in Josh Gordon but there are those guys, same with Cleveland, and about it in Cleveland, obviously bring Hunt in. There's those guys that their egos just kind of like take over, I feel like. And if you, like I always say, fantasy, you kind of dummy it down. Same as if you can avoid a guy that's got an injury problem or an off-field problem, like why not? I know you're getting it at a value, and maybe these guys see it that way. They're just business guys. But do you think it's like the value, or do you think it's the ego? What do you guys think?
That's interesting.
Who I could see, like if he got run out of Kansas City because of this whole thing, who I could see bringing them in? Philly. Right. Like, and I look at the organization and how they handle situations like this. Like they've shown that, again, not this exactly the same players, but the same ownership has shown an ability and being okay with bringing in people that have problems.
They have a really great locker room too.
Yeah. And I could see, there's teams that would be, I think, not okay with what he did, and no one's okay with if what he's alleged to have done he actually did. No one's okay with that. Let's just put that as a baseline. But I think there are teams that would see ability to rehabilitate him, and that would see an ability to. I mean, he's still a relatively young man, right? That can sort of treat that and sort of rehabilitate that aspect of what Tyreek Hill is, and try and benefit from him as a football player. So, I mean, I definitely think Andy Reid is at the forefront of I can rehabilitate players, and that has that's been tragic, and honestly, like that's been tragic for the Kansas City franchise. Andy Reid's son, Javon Belcher. I mean, the murder suicide. That was before Reid got there, but this is a franchise that's not foreign to tragedy. So. They have seen, and how that shaped who they've embraced is, I think it's an interesting, and it might not be right. It might not be wrong. That's probably not for, I'm not in a position to judge any of that, but it's interesting to see who would be interested in him, because Kansas City is usually the place that would be.
Well, they were also trying to clean things up there too. And this actually started before getting rid of Kareem Hunt. In the offseason, they dumped Marcus Peters on the Rams. And I guess the thought process behind that was they just had too much of a shit show in the locker room. And Peters was involved in a lot of it. So I think that they're kind of trying to do a rehab project there. Like if Tyreek Hill is not going to fall in line, I could totally see them just dumping him. But a lot of this stems from John Dorsey. He's the Browns GM now. He took Callaway, brought in Hunt, but he was there bringing these guys in initially. He drafted all these guys.
Yeah, he did.
It seems like the franchises that have a culture that's established are able to bring these guys in, and
yes.
that's what kind of they show up, and they're like, you can take the ego, check it at the door, and come and be part of this team, and kind of maybe reinvent yourself. Or you can go to the, and they get them at a point where these guys are kind of like, and Hill, maybe he's not there yet, but if KC doesn't re-sign him, and for whatever reason, he's looking for a new team soon, he's going to be in that desperate situation where he's just going to be looking for a roster. And you were talking, Jordan, and, why not a place like Pittsburgh? You've got AB gone. You've got a culture that's established there. Juju's just wrecking havoc there. And wouldn't it be nice to see Juju and Tyreek Hill, getting long bombs from Big Ben?
Yeah,
I would hate that, by the way.
Yeah, that's right, Cleveland.
But it goes back to what we were talking about with Toronto, right? Like there are risks bringing taking a decision like that, and they can go really bad. And but sometimes they can pay off, and it's unfortunate that we have to talk about this, because I mean, if this didn't happen, right, we would have a very healthy 3-year-old, or presumably more healthy 3-year-old than we have right now, in terms of the child. And he was going to be the highest paid wide receiver in NFL history. Right. That's what the talk was, like, the week that this happened. And so, it's just the whole thing is it's honestly a tragedy, first and foremost for his child and his family, and second of all for him. And I mean, that takes definitely a backseat to this child's injury if what is alleged against Tyreek Hill is actually true.
I can't even imagine, man. I have a 3-year-old daughter. I cannot imagine. There are many times where the wife and I might not agree on something, and you just kind of take a step back and look around the room, and you're like, you know what, it's not really worth it. And I know this is very different. I don't know the ins and out about it. I can't even imagine having a 3-year-old, just them going through all that. And I think that's kind of the forgotten part of all this is, this guy's playing football for a living and he's making tons of money. Whatever he did or didn't do, or whatever the scenario is, that the 3-year-old's kind of caught in the middle, and that must really, really suck, because that will affect that child probably for a really long time, no matter what the outcome is.
Yeah, no doubt. And, I've got a background in sort of these types of cases, and it's just it's always a human tragedy, and you just don't want to, you're absolutely right. And honestly, like, I don't know, I've changed my daughter's 19 months now, like, changing your diaper. I mean, she's totally dependent on us to be alive, for thus far. I mean, at some point I'll be dependent on her for her to keep me alive, but life's a big circle like that. But it's hard to imagine where you get to a place where you can, abuse your kid, and, you just hope, whatever it is, you just hope it's an accident. And I mean, accidents happen. I mean, my daughter fell sitting in my hands. She fell out of my hands and fell on the ground. It's horrifying as a parent. You can't imagine doing it on purpose.
Last week, right before we started recording, my daughter likes to sit on our bed and watch her Peppa Pig or whatever show that she wants to watch before she goes to bed. And she was tickling my feet, whatever. She was sitting like a bit towards the end of the bed. I didn't realize how close she was. And she started tickling me, and I kind of leaned back laughing. And next thing I hear is like a thump. And I see my wife kind of dive towards the bed, and I look, and she's gone. And she literally landed on her neck. Like she flipped backwards on her neck. We were both in the room, and it took literally seconds.
Yeah.
We thought she was not gonna, you think the worst as a parent. She ended up being fine. She's she's like Gumby, I guess.
Right.
After she fight off the scare and all that, she was, joking around about it, and she was laughing. But it's scary because it could take a second, and like you said, Jordan, like, things happen that it's out of your control. Their kids move around, they're in your hands, even when they're like 19 months, 18 months. They wiggle the wrong way, and they might drop. But yeah, it's scary. And when you think about the scenario, you hope that that's what this whole thing is just, like we talked about, egos and that kind of stuff, maybe getting away of a misunderstanding.
Yeah. In a couple more years, your kids are going to be to the invincible age, where you are sitting there and they fall and do something, and you're like, oh my God, I don't even know. I'm going to have to take this kid to the hospital. And then they get up and they run away.
Right.
Like, and then, like my nephews, like, there are some falls that they have or things that they do. And I'm like, oh my God, they would have to take me to the hospital if that happened to me, Yeah. So that's coming soon. So that will redeem this for you guys. So don't worry.
It's funny. Gracie, my daughter's 19 months, and she can like bend, like she'll have something on the floor, and it's always funny. Like, you watch like the mechanics of like children, like, do a squat, and they do it like perfectly because they haven't learned to do it bad yet. Like, it's just the mechanical motion. So like, she squats down, she's got like her butt. I'm like, I can't even like imagine having that flexibility. Like,
we're a big yoga family, and my daughter will she'll just bust out the crazy like it's nothing. Like
Yeah.
first time
How do
she's
you do
tried,
that?
I'm like, you're ready to be an instructor, and you're 3. You know,
Right.
I
Yeah,
can't
for
do
sure.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Any big topics? Well, JD, you're in Adam, you're not in Scott Fish, but you and I have talked a little bit about sort of some things that I might try and do with my entry. JD, don't feel pressure to answer this question with anything specific because I don't want you to give away your strategy. But are you trying are you seeking to do anything? Maybe the word's not extreme, but any sort of unique strategies for Scott Fish?
So I'm like an open book. So anyone that knows me, I'm not worried about giving my strategy away. But I wanted to ask you because we didn't really get to talk. So where are you picking? What's your draft spot?
I'm at 111.
Oh, you're on the other end. I'm at 102. So
Okay.
we're both in a similar spot, but in different ends. I went on with John Hogue onto the. I don't know if you heard any of Matt Williams. He did a series. Basically, he did the 1-1 all the way to the 112, and he had people talking about. It's actually a very good, well done. It's a well done series. I'd recommend it to anyone that's not only in the Scott Fish Bowl, but anyone that does redraft. I think there's value, especially super flex and tight end preem. But like you said, there's many ways you can go Scott Fish Bowl. You want to be different. I was talking to Halal earlier who took. Was it Dalvin Cook that he took last year at like the 101 or something that?
Yeah.
You have people talking Mayfield. You have people talking Kelsey. I don't know. To me, if you can get one of those top 4 guys, you got to take it. I think you have to take it. And then when I'm coming back around on the turn, I'm kind of looking for growing on me is the fact that I'm going to go a little heavier on RB early than I probably initially thought when this whole, when I knew where I was drafting and who was in my division. But I think I'm kind of leaning where I'm going to go RB, one of those studs first, still deciding which one I'm going to go first, but at the 1-2. But I feel like on that turn, I can either go quarterback and running back and then kind of, see where the quarterback situation is and then kind of start because I feel like there's a lot of depth at running back or at wide receiver. And there's a pocket of receivers. And we talked about a bunch of them when I brought up that trade, like the Mike Williams, the Tyler Boyds. Those guys are going to be in a spot where you can probably stack like 3 or 4 in a row receivers and build yourself a nice core. But the other interesting thing that I heard, and it's got me thinking because I'm obsessed with stacking, and I want to remember who it was, but it's whoever is picking in the 111 or 112 on Matt Williams' series there. But he talked about coming back and doing like a stack. Like if you can get a top end quarterback with a top end receiver, and if I can get a nice stack, that's. Again, we don't know who's going to fall. You never know based on your draft. But if you can stack, let's say, I don't know, I'm trying to think of someone that actually falls like an Andrew Luck and a T.Y. Hilton, or like I don't think Mayfield and OBJ fall that far. Like maybe Matt Ryan and Julio is maybe a possibility there. But just getting yourself like a really strong wide receiver 1, QB 1 stack. Is probably the only way that I'm going to give in to the receiver position. Because I feel like in this type of tournament, I don't know. I feel like this type of tournament, you can get your value at receiver later. But without enough strength at running back, I think it's going to be hard to go kind of all the way to the end. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think the most interesting part about this is like, I guess you have to determine what you're trying to do, right? So for me, like I want to win, and like I would rather like come in last place in the tournament trying to win it than go in the middle and not take any risk. Like I that's just in this format. Like I would.
So what does that mean for you?
Yeah, so it means I'm going to take a ton of risk. And so, like, the idea of stacking is really interesting. I haven't sat down. There's some of this ADP circulating that honestly, like probably in the next like day or two, like, well, I probably should do it the next day or two because it's the draft starts on Monday. But like, I wanted to sort of see where it all settled out, and so I could sort of come together and see if I could put together like some stacks. And just I've been thinking about like offenses and the types of players and stuff, and sort of how that would build a roster and sort of what would be available at the turn for me. I think it probably I think you're either going to need a player to fall to you or to reach on a player probably by at least a round and a half to do a stack, right? Because like I don't think Adams probably makes it to the turn. I could be wrong, but I don't think he makes it to the turn. So, again, you talked about like Matt Ryan and like Julio. Like if Julio gets there, you're probably reaching on Matt Ryan for me to take him at 111 and 202, like you would have to probably reach on Matt Ryan by, I would guess it's a round and a half, if not more in terms of ADP. Those things are interesting. Like that's what interests me. I don't know. I think a lot of it too is like the roster construction, right? If you can sort of be a little bit different, like I think a lot of people are going to go running back early. So if you sort of fade that and go, quarterback and receiver early, and then sort of maximize the back end with taking a lot of running backs, like your roster will look different, but you'll, in terms of the players and in terms of the construction of it, like I think that's interesting. Like I think doing different things in terms of this, like to stick out. I mean, it's 1,500 people, and ultimately, I mean, the way it breaks down, like I think you need a mix of, this isn't a GPP, right? In the terms of like, you need to finish once, number one overall. You actually need to win your division or come in second place, or excuse me, win your division or score the most points in your division. That's not the division champion to advance. And then I think there's some wild cards, but like, so the upside, like the season long upside is important, but then you sort of get in the playoffs and I think there's the eliminator round, and like it's the top half, bottom half in round 14. And then you have to win week 15, which is like a combination of your conference, like it's 1 and 12, I think, advance to the actual finals. And then to win it, you got to be the top in the top in the finals. So to do that, you need upside and a lot of it, right? Because you got to finish, 1 out of 15, 2 weeks consecutively to actually win. I think it's 15. I think that's the way the numbers break down this year, but I could be wrong. It might be 18 in terms of conferences, but I think it was 12 last year if memory serves, but I think it's bigger this year. Should probably check on that too. But needless to say, like you need to actually win, you need a ton of upside. So I think taking on risky profiles, I mean, a guy like Tyreek Hill, I mean, that's a guy that's really interesting because he has the ability to tilt your league when it matters, if he's back or if he's not suspended. I mean, the payoff of that's immense, right? So how do you do that? I mean, how do you think about a guy like Josh Allen, right? Who had, basically closed the season in the last 6 weeks as being QB2, but there's a ton of risk there, so all of those things are interesting. I mean, I'm sort of in on the stacking idea. I just think you have to figure out how to do it. I might only roster 2 quarterbacks too. That might be another thing that I do. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, I rostered Luck and Breeze last year. So, and I stacked Breeze I got Michael Breeze. I had Michael Breeze, Drew Brees and Thomas stacked last year. And then I came back with Luck, and it happened early too. So like taking Luck, we didn't necessarily know. I mean, it happened, the draft's 2 months before the season started. So there was some risk there, but again, I wanted to embrace it because to win, you have to do that type of stuff.
That's the stack that the guys, sorry, Adam,
you're good.
I was talking about was Breeze and Thomas was one that I forgot. That's what he managed to do last year.
Yeah. And honestly, like I don't know if I haven't looked at the scoring enough yet to know. I'm not sure how predictive last year is, but I don't know if Thomas had enough like 100-yard games to truly be elite in this, right? And I think you sort of need to, if you're drafting in the top round, like I think you need to have, number 1 overall position or finish type upside. And I'm not sure Thomas has that with the I mean, he did it on a ton of catches, but I don't think he had the yardage bonuses, if memory serves. I think he was one of the people that was hurt by the scoring format.
He's one guy in general. As much as I love that offense and I love Mike Tom, I just find it hard to draft him with everyone else that's there, and it's exactly for that reason. I just find his ceiling is just limited. I don't know. I'm trying to find a question for you. I'm trying to find Stompy's roster from last year. I was trying to find it last week.
I saw it earlier, or like a week or two ago.
Quarterbacks he had. I've been trying to find it every time I, for some reason, end up somewhere talking about the fishbowl, and I forget to pull it up. Otherwise,
I want to say he had several quarterbacks.
did he? Okay.
Yeah, I think it was.
That was kind of the only thing I wanted to see on his roster. I'm like, did he go like very slim? Because I know like best balls, I like to do just 2 quarterbacks and kind of, get them like in the middle back-to-back type of thing. But in this type of tournament, because you're limited with trades, you've got the waiver. I compare this to the FFPC, the football guys championship. They have a tournament where you draft your roster and then you've got your waiver wires twice a week. Otherwise, you can't trade. And then you win your league, and then you move into a bigger tournament where you're paying for like $250,000.
Okay, I got it.
Did you?
Yeah,
I'm looking it up too. Yeah.
So he had Jared Goff, Josh Rosen, and Mitchell Trubisky with Chase Daniel.
Oh, okay.
At quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He had Alvin Kamara, Philip Lindsay, Christian McCaffrey, Elijah McGuire, Joe Mixon, Chris Thompson, and Giovanni Bernard at running back.
How did he get Kamara and CMC? Am I missing?
That had to have been round 1 and 2.
Wow.
Yeah, he must have had a lick of it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, if you look, he hit on these quarterbacks, Goff, Rosen, or Goff and Trubisky, essentially. I mean, they wouldn't have went that high, right?
I'm going to try to pull it up. I was going to say those guys were going pretty late last year.
Yeah. Receiver, he had Doug Baldwin, Kiki Kuti, Corey Davis, Quincy Enunwa, Dason Hamilton, Demarius Thomas, Tyrell Williams, Robert Woods.
And he had Kittle.
And then he had Mark Andrews and George Kittle and Chris Herndon at tight end.
So, like, I look at this and it's like, all right, well, sort of what we were talking about. Like, you need to maximize the upside in terms of at the end of the season. Like, Doug Baldwin was the perfect person for that, right? 'Cause what did he play? I mean, he didn't play. If he played 9 games last year, I think it was less than that, but he was immense down the stretch. I mean, I remember watching, I had Wilson and Baldwin stacked in a league, and it was, I think, a Sunday night game, like the last game of week 16, if memory serves, or it was a late Sunday afternoon game. And I was watching, and I mean, they went berserk in that game and won me that league. And that's the, one of the concepts that I talked about in the book, and, Adam's familiar with, and JD, I think we talked about it when I appeared with you, was like warp and A-warp and like wins over replacement, and the impact you can have in like one game and sort of what that means. And like Baldwin was immense and down the stretch. And so like you look at that, like, yeah, he didn't have a full season, but some of the guys that he hit on, like Deshaun Hamilton, like he hit when it mattered. You know what I mean? So that upside, McGuire was the same way. He didn't start all the games, but he had a big time performance when it mattered. So
to your risk strategy, like I used to be a big redraft player, and I had actually tried this too, because essentially what you need to win a redraft league is you need the solid production, and then you need the guys later on in the draft that you get at a value to outproduce significantly where they were drafted, or one of them, or whatever. So if you pencil round 1 for round 1 production, 2, 3, and so on, you need the guys that you're drafting in the 7th round that are putting up round 2 production. So the problem is when you go too risky and you do it across the board, and I guess it depends on what you're talking about being risky, Jordan, is that you are going to hit on some of those, but you don't have the solid production, getting what you're supposed to. So it's almost like you have to draft the solid players that are safe and going to produce, and then you have to take the riskier guys later and hit on them. And it almost has to be like a blend in a league this size, because you're going up against all these other people. So So I know what you're saying about the risk profiles and going risky, but you got to be careful that you don't take too big of swings. They have to be smart risks, like you were talking about, like with McGuire and some of these guys.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's a balance, right? Like you just have to have the right balance because you're trying to win your league, which is leaning more towards the chalk, right? And you picking up that value as it drops through the draft. But like Adam said, for you to kind of take it to the end, differentiate out of 1,200 teams and kind of go, become the stompy of next year, you do have to differentiate at the bottom end. And that's like, I look at what you just mentioned with Trubisky and Goff. So Trubisky was going at 140 ADP, the 16th quarterback off the board.
Yep.
And he finished top? He was up there. I don't have it in front of me what he finished last year, but it was
like a top 6 warp guy last year. It was pretty crazy.
Definitely better than 16, right? And then Goff is the guy, like Goff was going as a top 10, but he also finished as like a top, again, I don't have it in front of me, but just off memory, he finished as a top end, QB1. So I think he got his value there. And that's kind of what Adam is saying is you got to definitely have solid production from your kind of pillars, like we call them in Dynasty. And then you've got to have your upside guys kind of all have to hit at the same time or at the right time.
And he did with Philip Lindsay, like he did that. He got these guys late and he went solid. I mean, his first 3 picks were running backs. It had to have been Kamara, McCaffrey, Mixon.
Yeah.
And then he hits on Lindsay later on and hits on these quarterbacks. I mean, if it was just one quarterback, other way in draft position, he might not have won the whole thing. And I guess you could say that across the board. But I mean, he got fortunate with waiting and grabbing these guys late with, in Goff and Trubisky. I'm actually kind of surprised that the winner didn't have Pat Mahomes because he was going maybe not as late as some of these guys, but Mahomes was that's kind of that fits exactly his strategy of what he did, taking these younger quarterbacks that are unproven later on in the draft.
Well, Wentz was going as QB2.
Yeah.
And
that hurts.
And Garoppolo at QB7, and then Mahomes was at 8. So imagine you pass on those two, or you pick up one of those two guys and pass on Mahomes, and then you got to feel that for the rest of 2018.
Yeah. No, I think it's a combination of like you need to hit early, but if you can be correlated, right? Like, so that's what I'm talking about with like risk. Like, I'm not talking like, willy-nilly haphazard decisions. I'm talking more of like how you only drafting 2 quarterbacks, like for instance. And I noticed in this last year was I think the rosters are tight enough in terms of you got to start 11. You only can start, you have to start 11 in terms of all the roster spots, but there's 22 roster spots. So there are quarterbacks on the waivers. Like I picked up Nick Mullins, right? Like there are these scenarios that you just can't. Not every starting opportunity is going to be rostered. So, and if you look at the people there was like 45 plus starters last year at quarterback. Like there was a lot of players that started at quarterback. So you could get by if you needed somebody. You could figure that out. So, I mean, that's one thing. Like if you go early at the position, like I think you can, like that's a way you can embrace the roster flexibility that gives you. But yeah, I mean, all of these, I think it's interesting. Like it's a good strategic thing, right? Like you have to think about what you want to do, what you want your strategy to reflect, how you want your team to reflect your strategy. And I think there's a lot of different ways to go about it.
I think you gotta. I talked about it, on our show this week. Is I think you just gotta stay fluid. Like you're at 111. You never know what's gonna happen. Sal Lito was on our show, talking about I think it was a mock that he was doing, but Barkley fell at like 106, I think it was, I think it was 106. So if you think about, somebody already said they're taking Mayfield 101, and then you've got Mahomes going in a few of those early drafts. I think that there's going to be enough value that falls eventually. I find like anytime Superflex tight end premium is involved, and then you've got all these other twists, there's no way that value is not falling at some point, whether it's at receiver, at some position. So it's one of those where you don't want to always be at the tail end of the runs. You don't want to pick up that. You rather get yourself that tight end 1 or that wide receiver 5 or 6, as opposed to going for the RB 13. You know what I mean? Or the RB 15. So you gotta be able to change your strategy as the draft goes, like we talk about, in normal fantasy or like we always do. But especially a tournament like this, I just feel, and I said this exact line, like if you are too set on your strategy, you're gonna miss on the value. And there's so many intricacies. Like, we got to remember, there's 3 wide receivers that you have to start every week. So as much as everybody, including myself, are saying, yeah, you're going to wait on receiver, if you can lock up 3 legit like wide receiver 1s, and then you just play with those other positions, that's another strategy you can do. That kind of gives you a nice solid base where you don't even have to think every week, who am I putting in my wide receiver spots? I'm going to pick 3 studs, and then I'm going to play with, go deep in my other positions like running back or whatever it is. But there's so many different ways you can approach it. But I do think that the biggest mistake people can make is being too stuck to their ways when they go in with that strategy and kind of miss out on the value.
Yeah, I mean, he went running back, but I don't think that really matters. Like, if you subbed out Kamara for Hopkins, I think he still could have won. I know it was probably a playoff at the end, but I mean, similar numbers. So I'm with you. I think that you sticking to it, having a plan is a good idea, but I think that you need to, when the runs happen, you need to be fluid, just like you said. And so if you're stuck on taking a guy, especially later on in the first round, if you plan on, oh yeah, this guy's going to be there the entire time, and then he's not, maybe someone else fell to you, like I wouldn't be panicking. And yeah, I think it's important to be fluid later on. Maybe if you were planning on a receiver in round 1 and then a running back you didn't expect to, falls to you, maybe that changes something later on for your strategy. It's important to be fluid.
I think I like to compare it to poker, right? Like you know what to do when you hit a certain hand or whatever, but there's different ways to play different scenarios. And if you're able to be fluid in the sense that whatever happens, you can kind of go with the flow and make the best of that opportunity. I think this is very similar in that sense where, maybe you were thinking I'm going RB or RB QB, and then like next thing you know, you've got OBJ and Juju kind of or whatever. Like, I'm just throwing my guys that I think highly of, but you're kind of sitting there where you can get 2 of your top like 3 or 4 wide receivers to start off the draft, and maybe you change the direction you go or whatever it is, whatever the scenario is. I think it's very important to stay fluid in these type of tournaments, and it's one of those things where the nature of this tournament is so fun. Like, Jordan, you've how many have you done of these now with the Fishbowl?
It's my second one.
And how fun was it last year, right?
Oh, it was great.
Yeah, like everybody's talking strategy. Everybody's this year there's gonna be 1,200 people talking about their strategy and their 2 cents on how to do it and where they got value or whatever it is. So I think it's one of those tournaments, and let's remember, it's free, it's for charity. So this is the type of thing where if you have like some crazy idea that you think might work, this is the tournament where you might want to try it, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You guys got any last minute thoughts? Can wrap up here. Closing it close to the top of the midnight hour, 11:30.
Oh wow, we went what, 1.5?
Yeah, man.
Imagine that with Jordan on the.
Yeah, I find that hard to believe.
I'm just hoping that we get good news and that Kawhi resigns with Toronto this weekend. So
that'd be fun.
Yeah, I like the storyline. So
yeah,
I'm not gonna argue that, man. I will not argue that. I hope he stays, and it'd be nice for Toronto to be. You know what it is? It's like, I don't know. And I think you guys feel that, and that's kind of why you hope he stays here. Is we're kind of the underdog in the sense that it's us versus how many other teams in the U.S.
For sure.
You know, we have one team. So that's why I was saying, like, he's got literally an entire country behind him. So it'd be nice for him to stay just to keep us that relevant for the next, whatever amount of years. But I think that even if he does leave, like I said, the fact that Masai's there, hopefully he can make some magic happen again if Kawhi doesn't.
I guess I didn't even think about it as like the whole country versus all the teams in the U.S. I guess the way I look at it is that you're not a major market in the United States, and that's why I want him to just stay there, because I like that. And it's probably because I'm in a small market in the United States. Like I like that. Giannis is going to stay there in Milwaukee, and I want Toronto and these Midwestern cities and states and stuff. Like I want them to have stars on their team. It's just better that way. I don't want everyone going to Golden State or LA or New York. Like it's terrible. So Miami.
It gives everyone hope, right?
Yeah.
If they never come to these small markets, you don't have championships and you don't have a hope, then why bother being a fan?
That's why I love seeing Zion in New Orleans. Like that is just
it's good.
Which, by the way, there's already little clips because his first game was tonight. So
apparently got hurt.
Yeah, knee to knee, but he had a dunk or two. So
that works. That works. Well, guys, we should do this again. We should do a post Scott Fishbowl, do a little evaluation of our strategies and exactly how much risk we all took on.
Well, I'm not in it, so I'll critique both of your teams. So
yeah, I like that. I kind of like having the outsider. Just
I like that.
I like it.
Yeah, he claims to be an outsider, but he knows that I'm going to be bouncing ridiculous ideas off him for all hours of the day in the next 24 hours. So.
Yeah, probably.
Let's be honest about where we're headed. So.
It's always nice having that one guy that's not in the league that you can ask questions to, right? That's kind of why I asked Jordan that trade question tonight.
That's it.
Exactly. We got 60 hours. That's
why I go to Jordan with my trade stuff, because all my buddies are in my leagues and stuff, and I'm in no leagues with Jordan. So
yeah, we're in one league together, Trade Addicts 5. I think that's
okay.
We're in together. I
think so. We are. Yeah. I think we are. So, all right, guys. Well, it has been fun. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. We will hopefully see you guys all soon. For JD, make sure to follow Goat District on Twitter and follow his podcast, Goat District. Follow Adam on Twitter at AJWooly2. You can find his podcast at Top Dog Dynasty, and you can also find his written work hidden in the Analytics of Dynasty, which is I
was gonna say, I'm like, what the hell did I write?
Yeah. all of his guidance, and Adam is a great sounding board at all hours of the day because he does not seem to sleep. He always seems to be interested in talking Dynasty, and always seems to be willing to, at a moment's notice, put up with any crazy idea, including but not limited to this afternoon on his drive home. So those are the best friends to have. So you can follow him at AJWooly2.
That's not the definition of a friend.
And you can follow me on Twitter at McNamara Dynasty, and we will talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, guys.
See you.
Let's see here. Let me stop this.